Greetings, everyone. I hope you are all having a wonderful night tonight. Thank you for joining us on yet another Brony Debates Live. If this is your first time here, let me give you the rundown of how this stream sort of works. I have chosen an issue that has been suggested to me by my Patreon supporters and my fans on Twitter, and I have gathered people with a variety of perspectives on the topic. We're gonna sit down, we're gonna talk this out, see if we can find some common ground, learn about each other, and we're gonna do that for about 30, 40 minutes, something like that. And then in the last 15 minutes of the stream, if you have had any questions or interesting comments throughout, feel free to put them in the chat, and then the last 15 minutes of the stream, we're gonna get to them there. To help me along with that, I've got moderating the chat to make sure you all behave and to write down your questions, Mr. DJ Skywalker. How are you doing tonight, DJ?
I'm doing all right. It just got very loud on my end, so I'll be quiet for a bit.
All right, yeah, he's got those little ankle biters over there that like to make noise. Also joining us tonight to offer his perspective on the issue is Mr. Peter New. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I know it was a short notice. I only managed to reach out to you just this Monday, and I usually try to give a little bit more notice than that. But once again, thank you so much for coming on. And I also brought on my good friend Josh Scorcher, or Firebrand, however he wants to be called. I tend to go in between them myself. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I exist at the start.
All right. So, with that being said, let me just give a quick shout out to all of my very generous supporters on Patreon. I finally learned how to say that sentence. I stutter it almost every week. Those guys make this stuff possible. Makes it easier for me to make time out of to do these streams and continue to make content. I'm especially grateful to the people on the $10 and up tier. This is a big long list and it keeps getting bigger. Here we go. Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Jennan, Kellogg, Kyle Christensen, our moderator, DJ Skywalker, Stephen A. Wilson, Reck, Rein-Kun. We got a new one on the list this week. Princess Sunshine Sparkle, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series. Guys, most of my supporters also make content of their own. Please check them out in the description and thank them for their support. And with that, let's get into it. So, last week, I believe, it was either last week or about 2 weeks ago, the journalist outlet, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, The Atlantic, came
magazine.
Yeah, online magazine. That's a good term for it. The Atlantic came out with a piece, and it was titled "My Little Pony fans are ready to admit that they have a Nazi problem," and that was very interesting to me. I'm just going to give away my perspective right here at the start. I never noticed. I'm going to be totally honest. If it was there, I've never noticed. So it really got a lot of attention. It got a lot of attention on Equestria Daily. It got a lot of attention on Twitter. In my Discord server, we were talking about it for days on end. But whether or not it was if the ideas put forth in this article really held any water. So and then on top of big, heavy political issues being my favorite thing to discuss, I got a suggestion to cover this article, and so I jumped right on it. So, let me ask you guys, Peter, Josh, have you read this article? Do you know what I'm talking about, or am I speaking completely Greek to you right now?
Oh, yes, I have read the entire thing.
Okay.
I skimmed it, but I am familiar with the thing. Come in contact with it.
Yeah, that's all that matters. And then, Equestria Daily came out with their opinion on it, and another outlet that I have tabbed over here, Quillette, came out with sort of a response piece to that. But before we really get into that, I would like to, take the liberty to define our terms. So, what is a Nazi? Now, when I hear that word, I think a very historical context. I think Yeah, I think Germany, mid 1930s to mid 1940s. It had racial connotations roped into it as well. That I'm never going to deny that. There was also an economical philosophy involved in it, and to say it got out of hand would be a gross understatement. And not that anything they were really standing for was anything I would have stood for to begin with, but a lot of the. So that's what I think when I hear that word. So Peter, are we about on the same page here, or do you have anything you would like to add or take away from what I just said?
We're on the same page and not, in that, yes, obviously, the historical context is where it originated, but it's never really gone away either. And Nazi was always a term that the Nazis themselves did not like for themselves. It was a slang.
Oh, really?
Oh
yeah, that's right. They called themselves the
Democratic Socialist Party or something like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
But it's also, for me, ultimately it's a word for fascism and white supremacy.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Whether historical or current.
Okay.
Would I be correct in saying like fascism fueled by white supremacy? Would that be correct? Or just intertwined?
I think I would sort of land on intertwined ultimately. I don't think you're wrong necessarily, but I would land on intertwined.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to. This is a conversation tactic that my dad taught me, is to repeat what the other guy said in your own words in order to understand them.
Absolutely. I think that's a valid conversation tactic for sure. I do that in auditions when I'm taking notes all the time.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. So, Josh, do you have anything you'd like to add or take away from what either of us have said?
Well, I'm pretty sure I agree with you guys, both in the sense of, it's like Nazism is... It's got elements of fascism. It's got elements of white supremacy, and I think we can split hair. I think we can split hairs about the nuances, but that's more or less what it is.
Alrighty then. So, Josh, given that you've read the article from the Atlantic, give me your thoughts on the article as a whole before we get into the deeper issues of it. Tell me what you think.
Well, I read the entire article, and I did a little more research about the specific members of the community that it was referring to, and I have come to a conclusion.
Tell me.
Gentlemen, we have been betrayed, we have been backstabbed, and we have been quite possibly bamboozled.
All right, we're quoting Red versus Blue here. In a couple of sentences here, tell me why.
Well, if I'm trying to keep it short and pithy, the behavior of the individual Buttercup Dew reeks to me of trolling.
Does it?
Yes. I look at this. I see this like all over. I've seen this before. It just reeks of a guy who's just trying to push people's buttons because it'll get him attention.
All right. I do happen to have Buttercup Dew's interview tabbed as well, and I'm prepared to screen share it. But before we do that, let's get Peter's take on this article. Peter, what do you think, sir?
Well, I guess my first reaction is to say, well, ultimately, when we're talking about an issue such as this, at what point does trolling for attention excuse racism? And I think it doesn't. And I think that it doesn't matter why you are motivated to pull Nazi tropes out of your butt. I think you are not excused.
All right, so how does that pertain?
And Buttercup is not the only one, right? Like, this is not a one person thing.
No, absolutely not.
Right. So
I would be I would be very surprised if I would be very surprised if he was the only one. In fact, if there were, like actual legitimate fascists, Nazis, white supremacists in the Brony fandom, it's like I wouldn't be surprised, because it's like, it's like no fandom is a monolith. It's like there's so many different people coming in for all sorts of different perspectives, backgrounds, that sort of thing. So if we didn't find a Nazi, and if we didn't find any fascists, I would honestly be very shocked.
So one of my followers reminded me of a principle, and I forget what he called it, but it was roughly along the lines of the bigger a group gets, the more likely you are to find an example of any other given type of subset of person or ideology, whatever have you, for that kind of thing. So that would, if I could remember the name of this principle, that would sort of be in line with what Josh has said here. But my original question, Peter, was how, let's put it this way, how accurate do you think that article was?
Well, as I said earlier, I really only skimmed it because I have a sort of immediate and emotional response to this, because I find the whole thing very disappointing, and because I've been dealing with it for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned on my Twitter recently, there have been conventions that I have asked for the Nazi in question to be removed, and they have refused, and so then I have refused to attend. And so this is stuff that bothers me deeply. I don't consider it to be a political difference. It's a moral failing. And this is a show that is about morals, and a show that is about finding your better selves. And so, yes, the Brony community has a Nazi problem.
Okay.
Because I agree with that much of it as far as that goes.
Yeah, I would agree with you on technicality. It's like, yes, I would agree that the Brony fandom has a Nazi problem because, well, I believe that Nazis are a problem. I believe that ideology is a problem.
Yeah, that ideology is a problem, and there are enough people that are either trolling or supportive of that ideology within the Brony community that it's a fandom problem. It's not Bronies exclusively. It's a fandom problem across different genres. But I mean, I'm an actor from the show, so I am particularly consumed with this fandom.
Okay. So my next question is how prevalent do you think it is? Given your experiences, how much of this have you seen first hand, second hand, third hand? It doesn't really matter, but compared to your broad experiences with the fandom, how many encounters with fascists of any kind have you had? We'll start with Peter for this one.
Sure. Well, I mentioned earlier my conversations I had regarding particular conventions.
Mm-hmm.
I know online I've definitely had interactions with people who have, they've got their avatars of Ariana and their, Zecora slave owner memes and crap like that. And, so that happens, and they're loud. But I have to say that they are a minority in the community. But just because, people like to say, oh, it's a few bad apples. Like I liken it to what's going on with cops right now. People with the argument being either all cops are bastards or it's just a few bad apples. Well, the problem with a few bad apples, it's that a few bad apples spoils the bunch.
I know. That idiom drives me nuts too.
It drives me crazy because you can't. You wouldn't buy a few bad apples with a few good apples at the store. You'd only buy the good apple. So it doesn't really matter to me ultimately. I mean, the question is an interesting one, but it's moot because it has to be denied and eradicated.
Okay, but that I have some qualms with that. with the word eradicated, but we'll come back to that. Josh.
Yeah, let's circle back.
Yeah, Josh, what have your experiences been?
I honestly, I don't think I've ever ran into a single white supremacist, a single Nazi, a single fascist. Well,
that you know of, yeah.
That I know of.
Right.
I mean, I've met like people who I would, as describe as fascist. It's like because I've spoken politically with some of them, but they would never describe themselves as fascist. In fact, they would probably describe themselves.
Well, that word has such horrible connotation to it. Why would anybody cop to that if they can avoid it? It's because I think most intelligent people, or at least anybody with 2 floating brain cells, would know that if they said, "Oh yeah, this is," I totally believe we should subjugate a certain group of people under our jackboot, would just completely invalidate them in any conversation. So, with that factor in mind, Josh, what else can you tell me?
That's really it. I haven't met anyone who would willingly identify as a Nazi, fascist, or white supremacist in this fandom. I mean, I've been called that a couple times, even though I've stressed multiple. Even it's amazing. It's like, okay, I frequent Tumblr. Okay, it's like I love Tumblr. I love the interface, but gosh dang it, if I'm not the embodiment of everything that Tumblr hates.
Yeah, so you do tend to lean conservative on a lot of issues, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to get your opinion on this is because you have been accused. So tell me what that's been like.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They don't hate. It's like the funny thing is that a lot of them don't hate me because of my conservative beliefs. They mostly hate me because I'm straight, white, male, relatively well off, and just a whole bunch of superfluous traits. I mean, if they hated me for what I believed, okay, I could actually engage with it. But no, they hate me for really surface level stuff that I don't really have any control over.
Half of the things you just listed are immutable factors. So yeah, so okay, that blows that angle out of the water. I thought we were going to go down a rabbit hole with that.
Oh no, it's just. Yeah,
I think people do like to resort to strawman attacks because they sort of lose track of what is really on the table. I think I wanted to sort of circle back to something. People, of course, they don't want to be called fascists, but what we're really seeing right now, I think, is there's a movement towards authoritarianism, which in and of itself is not necessarily fascist, but it easily tips into it, and I think it is started to.
Agreed.
Oh,
so I think people will more easily call themselves authoritarianists or something.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's just when you said that, it's like the person the person I'm referring to has lovingly described themselves as authoritarian. So
well, you're
exactly right about that.
And I'm, and this is the thing is like I'm on here because I'm liberal, right? I'm a lefty. But here you and I are having a pretty decent conversation so far because I don't disagree I disagree politically with conservatives, but I don't disrespect conservative ideals. I think balance is ultimately what we need,
Thank you. I haven't had a lot of great and calm, reasonable conversations like this, so I want to thank you. That has a weight off my chest.
Same, because I don't think there's any reason why a liberal and a conservative can't get together and get along and have a decent conversation.
Thank you.
When ideas are being discussed, that's one thing, but that's the problem that I have with this particular issue is these are not ideas, these are philosophy, and it's not a political issue, as I said before, it's a moral one, and I think that there's a humanness that gets overlooked, and and I don't want a world like that, nor should anyone, I don't think. And I know I can't be the police of that, but I mean, it just seems to me that you want a world where people are going to get along with each other, and that's what we have to try for, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's what Brony is supposed to be about.
Well, that was my feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times that it's like I'm a reviewer of a lot of the episodes, and I go over and over about how it's like there's a lot of complainers in the fandom about how like a lot of the morals seem to be very preachy, and a lot of the morals seem to be repeated, like especially the tell the truth moral.
Well, it's for 5-year-olds, you guys. I mean, come on.
Well, that.
I don't view that as much of an excuse either way. But we're getting off topic here. Josh, finish what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, basically, my argument that's part of the argument is that it's for 5-year-olds, and how many times do you still lie? How many times are you still dishonest? How many times do you still cheat? How many times do you still get angry? It's like this is supposed to be a show with morals for 5-year-olds, yet you still don't listen to them.
Well, here's the thing: is a 5-year-old in season 1 is not a 5-year-old anymore by season 3, and so there's a new 5-year-old.
Oh, that's a
yeah. I mean, think about this, and this was pointed out to me. The Central Florida Bronies had a finale party, right? And somebody pointed this out to me, and I could feel every gray hair on my head when he said the fact that that people who were 11 years old when the show started were now at this party drinking legally. Okay.
Yeah.
And Peter, I know you're Canadian, so this doesn't hit as hard for you, but down here in the States,
it's 2 years less hard for me.
Down here in the States, you got to be 21. So that's not something you think about a child, and then he's at the party and he's drinking, and so that it not only is there a new 5-year-old, but the one that was 5 is now older and learning something different. So
yeah, I mean, I'll put that in the context of my own daughter, who's now 12, but who loved the show when, 2013. She was a huge fan of it at that time. She doesn't care for it at all anymore, and so that's the thing that Hasbro, I'm sure, is interested in, is as much as we're all very grateful for the appeal that the show has had outside of that demographic, but that's what it's for, and that's like they repackage it and repackage it and repackage it every couple of seasons because they're looking for a brand new audience every year.
Yeah. Once I get kids, it's like when I get kids, I'm indoctrinating them in MLP.
Well, good. But they're going to start hating it, and then they'll like it again maybe later.
Now then, I'm
still hoping for my daughter to come back around.
To steer things back here, so. To summarize, Josh hasn't met anybody who would fit our description of white supremacist in person and has known about it. Peter has met a few. Do you think you'd be able to put a number to it?
In person, I couldn't tell you because in person,
people hide things.
But I know that I've certainly encountered, I don't know, probably 50 at least online.
So can you tell us about those experiences? Under what context do you run into these people, and would you be able to recant a story for us, telling us what happened, what started the interaction, how it ended?
Usually, I mean, I went through a number of years where I was very interested in trying to have civil discourse on Twitter, which I know is foolish of me. And so I would try and engage whoever wanted to talk. And people would revert to all sorts of, logical fallacies and arguments with me that made no sense. And so I'd end up checking out their profiles. And you'd go to their profile, and it'd be littered with swastikas and other offensive things. And so I just started to, at first, the temptation really at first is to say, well, this is one idiot. This is just one troll. This is just one somebody. And I see somebody in the chat saying 50 interactions and how many total interactions? Well, I don't know, thousands of total interactions, but does it matter? If one interaction gives me coronavirus, it doesn't matter that I meet 1 billion people. Thanks, Pat.
That is an interesting question in and of itself, and I want to come back to that after you finish what you're saying now.
Well, I think I'm essentially finished. I don't. As soon as I find out someone is willing to engage with fascist propaganda, such as a swastika, etc., then I'm done with them. I'm blocking them. That's that. You're done. You're out. I don't care. You're not. It's not acceptable, and that's that.
Alrighty then.
So I just eliminate it, right? And we're going to come back to eradication. I don't mean kill, obviously, but
yeah,
But I do.
I'm not keen on that word choice either, to be honest.
Well, conservatives tend not to be, interestingly enough. But fair enough. I mean, give me a different word to use, and I'll start using it. That's
yeah. Well, I'd have to get back to you on that one. I don't have
eradication.
Right? So
Eradication might be accurate. It might be an accurate word to use in some contexts, but the big question is what method. So let me ask you this question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, let me ask you, because you were saying, you said if I have one interaction and it gives me coronavirus, do the rest of the interactions mean anything? And that's a very interesting thing to look at. When I look at a whole group, I never look at a whole group and I see a whole group. I see individuals. In every context I've ever been in, there I try to just see each individual that I'm interacting with right now, and that person has had a life that is just as complicated, possibly even more so than my own has been. And and whatever everything that happened in the past has led to this moment of me talking to this person, whoever they are, however I agree with them, whether we're having a nice conversation or if they are literally trying to kill me. So with that in mind, whenever I have a bad interaction with somebody that I disagree with, whenever somebody threatens to kill me over something political, or if somebody is just, let's take this guy we were talking about earlier, an interview with Buttercup Dew. So the Buttercup Dew interview is linked in the description of this stream if you want to go check that out. It was cited in the Atlantic article as being an example of somebody who views themselves and openly admits to being a white nationalist. Like, if that person, so I'm dealing with a white nationalist. If that guy says he's a Christian, I know that he's not a Christian by what is being defined as a Christian. But if he says he's a Christian, he thinks for himself that he has those beliefs, then that doesn't mean anything onto Christianity as a whole. And that's just one example. If I see a Brony, and this Brony is this Brony is just the epitome of a person. But earlier in the day, I met somebody who is my mortal enemy, and they also called themselves a Brony. That certainly doesn't mean to me that so ultimately, I'm just taking a very long time to say I never judge I never paint with such a wide brush, and I might believe that some ideologies are problematic to varying degrees, but I would never paint a whole fandom like that. So, Josh, tell me what you think.
Well, not so many words.
Yes, please be more concise than me.
I remember one of my professors telling me, teacher, my high school history teacher, one of the greatest teachers I've ever had. He said that he does not subscribe to the concept of racism because racism relies on the logical fallacy of judging the whole by the actions of the one.
That's interesting, and let me follow up with on that with something else. A lot of cases of prejudice that I have encountered, and not even just for myself in a first person context, but second and third person as well. In my studies of psychology and in my studies of theology, whenever I meet somebody or read about somebody with prejudices, I can usually trace it back to some kind of negative experience, or it could have been one experience, or it could have been a whole lifetime of experiences that were bad towards this one group. It's either that, or it's a matter of ignorance, where they have not had a lot of exposure to this group. Like, for example, let's take sexism in mind, right? And in the early fandom, I actually met a lot of very sexist people, which was baffling to me. They're like these guys who would say, total, just the worst you could possibly imagine of the men go their own way movement kind of people. And all of that, and all of what that implies. And then their favorite show is Friendship is Magic. You mean the one with at this point in time exactly 3 male characters? One of them is in the chat with us right now. So and that's your favorite show, Mr. Women Are Inferior in Every Way. And what it would always boil down to is a bad relationship with a sister, bad relationship with a mother, and
Sure.
And never having been able to escape from that. And then they paint the whole gender with that brush of all the women I've ever known have been horrible people, so therefore all women are horrible people.
Which is stupid. There's no excuse for that.
No, there isn't. And every Thanksgiving we do the same thing with one of my uncles, who's the nicest guy on the planet. He'd give you the shirt off your back. Will not shut up about black crime rates, black crime statistics, and he won't shut up about how Hillary Clinton is a reptilian.
Nice.
Okay, so again, do I paint a whole group with that brush because of my uncle, or do I just recognize that is one person? Peter, what do you think about all this?
That's an awful lot, and sort of going back over the last kind of 2 prompts here. But what it comes down to for me, I guess, is, look, there are individual dynamics and there are group dynamics, and the two are intertwined. Individuals exist within groups or outside of them, and groups only change with individual change within them. So you can't look at an individual without looking at the group, but you just as equally cannot look at the group just because you've seen the individual. These things are not polarized. They're not with us or against us, black or white. It's not easy.
So do you believe there's a balance then? After you finish your point, I'm sorry.
Well, I think, yeah. I think it's the same kind of balance that nature strikes, right? It abhors a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what that says to me. You talk about people going, "Oh, well, I have one bad girlfriend, so I hate all women." There's some kind of vacuum there in your life that you're filling with a need for power that comes from having power over other people, and that's unacceptable. It's not decent, and I don't care if you're conservative, I don't care if you're liberal, but for God's sake, be decent. I don't care if you're Christian, I don't care if you're atheist. Be decent.
Indeed.
Be excellent to each other.
Well, really, yeah. What a stupid but excellent.
It certainly should be easy, but I do believe, and I'd like to touch on this point in a little bit, that it does take some kind of education in order to get from point A to point B, or to recover from point B and return to point A. But I would like to hear if Josh has anything to contradict or to add on to what you've said.
Well, yeah, I mostly want to add on to it. It's have you ever, to add on to what you just said, Brony, it's I feel like, to combat a lot of this is really, if a lot of these people have had bad interactions, I feel like the best way to change their minds is with compassion. It's
Well, that's an argument that I've heard in the past, and I don't disagree, but I also don't agree. I'd like to hear the rest of what you have to say, but I'd like to bring it.
But yes, also, just to add on to what you said about how, people can always take... Like, you ever seen the show Good Omens?
No.
Yeah.
I haven't. Tell me about it.
It's terrific.
Okay. Oh yeah, it's a very, very funny show about basically it's a buddy comedy with an angel and a demon. David Tennant plays the demon.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's freaking hilarious. And so they're listening to Jesus give the Sermon on the Mount, and then David Tennant comes up. He's looking around. It's like, what has he said that got everyone so upset? Be kind to each other. Oh yeah, that'll do it.
Oh yeah, that's a meme. I've been seeing that one around.
It's both hilarious and sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also to go back to something where you said like Nazi imagery was unacceptable. I mean, to what extent? I mean, would you say that the I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but would you say that something like the producers would be unacceptable?
Well, no, and that's I think satire is an acceptable use of something. I'm not interested in censorship, but I do think that there are a lot of these trolls who think that they're satirists and they're just not. I was thinking about this earlier too, right? Where it's like there's a lot of these people who just want to stir. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear or not, but I'm about to
do it.
There's a lot of people who just want to stir shit up, right?
Yeah.
And they stir shit up by throwing a swastika out there or drawing an Ariane with a Zagora slave and that kind of stuff. And they're doing it just because they want to stir it up. But the problem with stirring it up, such as the producers did, is that you're actually trying to point at something. You're actually trying to point at the injustice of it all or the absurdity of it all. You're trying to offer a view to replacement. Like, how can we live that's better than this? And if you don't provide anything besides the swastika, then you're not providing any kind of context besides white supremacy. And so there whether you mean to or not, you're now presenting white supremacy as the alternative. Yeah. And so that's not acceptable.
Yeah, I do agree with your point that, it's just because it's a satire doesn't automatically mean it's good. I mean, I think by definition,
because you think it's a satire doesn't mean it's a satire.
Yeah, and it's like, I think that a lot, maybe like, I'm just kind of spitballing here, is that maybe a lot of what these people doing is technically satire, but it's bad satire.
All right. I need to interject with between the two of you because I'm going to do this Apple Bloom thing.
We're having a heated argument.
I'm going to do this Apple Bloom thing where I stand on both of your heads and go, "You're both wrong," and then we all start fighting. And then Discord gets unleashed. So here's. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm bad at detecting sarcasm.
No, it's
all right, fair enough.
It's all right. What you guys are talking about satire with trolls, and you're making it way more complicated than it actually is. A widely accepted theory of psychology that I've read about is that trolls and people that do those kinds of things, they're not looking for anything except a reaction. It's not about satire. They're just sociopaths to some minor or major spectrum place on the spectrum depending on the individual. So the fact that if you have a reaction at all, they win is essentially what goes on there, and then we end up having these conversations on live stream here about whether or not it's an actual problem in the fandom and how much and what do we do about it, so shoot, the only winning move is not to play. What do you guys think about that?
Sure.
I would say well, I can actually draw from a very recent example about that. You remember, it's like, okay, so Pepe the Frog, right?
Yeah.
Do you know how that became associated with the alt-right?
I'm just gonna blanket out there and say 4chan, but you probably know more about it than I do.
It was accidentally. It's like the whole reason that it became a symbol for the alt-right is because of Hillary Clinton.
Oh, wow.
Well, not Hillary Clinton specifically, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, because there was an article that they posted. It's like, do you remember that image a while ago about the deplorables, where like it was the Expendables, but then there was like a bunch of like prominent like right wing figures like plastered on, and one of them had the Pepe the Frog face.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Well, Hillary Clinton's campaign actually got that from a Daily Beast article, and where they cited that they found this image from a prominent white supremacist. And you go to that prominent white supremacist account, immediately red flags start going up. One of them is that the guy's Twitter account name is Jared Taylor Swift.
I'm not familiar with the significance of that name.
Taylor Swift.
Oh, alrighty then.
So I just want to quickly interject that it was in the 2010s that the character's image was created as a symbol of the alt-right. So prior to Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Oh, that's interesting. Just out of curious, what told you that? Because like I'm complete.
That was from Wikipedia. Just a quick Google search.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But I mean, that'll have to get obviously corroborated. But that's Wikipedia telling me 2010s.
Well, yes. Anyways, so the frog image was created by this Twitter account, and in the Twitter bio, it said prominent white supremacist, and right below that, it said parody account.
Ooh, interesting.
Pepe the Frog was a 2005 comic by a guy named Matt Fury called Boys Club.
Yeah.
2005, yeah.
Okay, so what's your point, Josh?
Well, my point is that this is kind of this is what trolls really want to do. This is kind of like a gold star amongst the trolling community. Is that a presidential candidate accuses another presidential candidate of being an alt-right via association with a cartoon frog. Now, I don't find that hilarious. It's this is kind of this is the humor that I don't think is tasteful. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's. I mean, I can sort of understand it. I mean, okay, so my favorite kind of humor is misnomer. Like it's like ask any of my friends, and I will tease them relentlessly. Like they'll quote a movie, and I'll intentionally get it wrong just to get them mad. It's like they'll quote something from The Princess Bride and I'll say, "Oh, I love Labyrinth."
You know something.
And it's so much
Josh,
fun to get this. It's fun to see their anger.
Josh, I almost started this stream by calling you Discount AC Race Best. Peter, I don't know if you know what Josh looks like, but he has been mistaken for AC Race Best before.
Oh dear! I hope I haven't done that to you. I hope.
Oh no! You haven't. And here's the thing: is that but the point I'm trying to get across is that a lot of these trolls, when we take them too seriously. Oh hey, I just dropped my review show's name.
Yeah.
When we take them too seriously, yeah, they essentially win. They're essentially pushing our buttons and getting a reaction out of us. It's kind of weird how, like in the halcyon Wild West days of the internet, the word of wisdom that don't feed the trolls was prevalent, and it just seems to have vanished.
I mean, shoot, Lauren Foss.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about that. Can I chime in? What balance do you see that needs to be struck between ignoring it, though, and addressing it? Because I agree it shouldn't be taken too seriously, because a lot of them are just idiots. But at some point it does need to be addressed, because it turns into Charlottesville. It turns into these kinds of. It turns into concentration camps if you let it go.
I'd like to.
At what point? Where do you chime in and say no? That's enough. Let's stop there.
I'd like to field this one, if I may.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep. Take it away right after me, Josh. What I was gonna say is, try to be intuitive of how serious a person is, which I believe
It's hard.
Difficult, but I believe if you analyze things and have an understanding of nuance and try to talk to somebody, at least you can figure out exactly where on the sincerity they fall, and eventually somebody will reveal their true colors, and then if it's a problem, if they're a threat, or if it's nothing to worry about, address it from there. I mean, it's a whole spectrum.
So I want to poke at that a little bit.
Yeah.
So if they're a threat, I think there are people out there that would see the publication of a swastika without context as a threat.
I believe that explicit threats are threats, and this was
Sure, but are you Jewish?
No, but
So there you go.
there's plenty of other things that I could get offended by on their face, and I choose not to. But it's just been a matter of.
Here's the thing, like,
Yeah.
don't misunderstand me. I'm not offended by it. I just think it's wrong.
Right. Or
There's a
viewing it
difference.
as a threat, right? But what I do control is my reaction to that, and I just choose not to react until
But that's
somebody
silence, and
says
silence is violence. I'm sorry, you can't.
no.
It's not right.
Because
You
if somebody's getting their
Certain
power,
people, like,
hold
just
on.
saying, yeah, it's okay that certain people are getting hurt. That's not acceptable.
If somebody is getting their power from a reaction, then I'm not going to give them that power. But that's just regarding me. Now, if I see somebody doing it to somebody else, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm either going to interject where I can, or I'm going to encourage the person that is being victimized to interject on their own behalf. I do believe in standing up for yourself, and so I used to teach fitness and self-defense classes, and that was in an actual dealing with a violent mugging threat kind of thing. And that was one of those first things. I taught people that you are your own best defender, and I worked from there.
So listen, I'm a white guy,
Yep.
and I don't know if either of you are white or not. I'm guessing, Josh, you are, because you look.
Yes.
Brony, yes.
I look it, but I have a mixed heritage.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
So
one of the reasons that I've been called a Nazi is because I'm Aryan passing.
Right. So, I mean, there's three guys who pass as white having a conversation about racism, and we're three guys who pass as white who are saying, well, it's okay if you got to stand up for yourself, or maybe encourage somebody who has less of a voice than you. Somebody who has less of a voice than you, somebody who doesn't feel comfortable talking out loud, who has been historically persecuted, somebody who doesn't start from the same ground that we three all start from. We have to stand up for our friends. We have to stand up for people that don't have the same power that we have. We just have to.
Well, I've been
We are the privileged ones. I mean, we are the privileged ones. We are white passing. We have all the power.
You see, I gotta
We
cut
have
you
to
off.
say-
I gotta cut you off there because my life experience has not been any sort of thing from a point of privileged.
Your life experience isn't what privilege is about, man. Your life experience and privilege are disconnected. You can live on the street and still have white privilege. White privilege isn't about how successful you are.
I don't understand that at all.
White privilege is all about the ground that you start from.
Gosh, I'm not sure I follow you at all because I have lived on the street before.
Well, there you go. But you still have white privilege. I sure have been hungry before. I still have white privilege.
So define white privilege then.
Okay. It's difficult, man, but white privilege is all about society has been set up, especially society in the US, but society in Canada as well, has been set up to propagate white success, right? So the people of color, people who have different gender orientation, etc., women, all have to start from behind us. They have a starting line that is behind a white man.
Example?
Anything. Look at the world.
I'm gonna.
I'm asking for a specific example. It's like that's begging the question.
Okay. A specific example of a scenario where. All right. In voice acting, let's go to voice acting.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to play any part you want as a voice actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Black and brown people don't get the same opportunities as white people, even in voice acting.
Well, why not?
Because there is a systemic advantage given to white people, particularly white men.
What specifically is that advantage?
The advantage is your whiteness.
Okay,
that's not a specific enough example.
That's
okay,
circular.
let me get into it. But the example is the advantage is your whiteness. The advantage is that there is a pre-existing complicity between white people. Look at it like this: if you are a creature that lives in the water, you can't see the water, right? The water doesn't mean anything to you because the water is just the water, and whiteness exists like that in Western society. We don't see white advantage because we're white.
Okay, I think I know the question to ask that can clarify this.
I mean, I think it's interesting that you didn't invite a black or brown person to come into this discussion. I think it's super interesting, and I would love to hear from a person like that to see what they think. I have a friend who is outraged right now because he's been saying this stuff for years and years and years and years, and it's only just now that white people are starting to. So, I think it's preposterous to assume that it doesn't exist. People do misunderstand white privilege as, well, I'm not privileged because I've had a hard life. Well, I've had a hard life too. But that doesn't mean that I haven't been given particular advantages because of my gender and because of my skin color. I have been.
I can think of, in my time in academics and my time in the professional circuit, I can think of no such case where I've been given any sort of preferential treatment. As it stands right now,
you can see.
Well, as it stands right now, I'm the only pale-skinned guy at where I work. So there's that.
That's great. I'm glad you work somewhere progressive.
It has nothing to do with that. It's all. It was every one of those guys that I work with is far and beyond more qualified than I am. They know more. They've been in the industry for longer.
That's great. Well, I'm really glad it's a meritocracy where
right. So that's now. Let me ask you this. Let's take voice acting for example. So let's say your director specifically. Can you give us an example of a director who hired somebody specifically because of their skin color on any?
That is beside the point. That is completely beside the point. You can't cite a specific example of a systemic problem. Right?
But if it was systemic, it would be. If it was systemic, it would be very easy to cite.
No. It doesn't work like that, dude. It's a systemic issue if it's a thing that happens as a default, right? Like I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today about how she plays Quidditch, and in Quidditch there's a rule that says that each gender needs to share the field equally, but routinely the women don't get passed to. Routinely, if somebody non-binary shows up, they get a woman to come out of the game so the non-binary can take a woman's place. So the men are always on the squad, but the women trade out with non-binary. So men have a systemic advantage.
Okay, now that's a specific example. That's
great. So that happens in basically everything.
All right, but I don't. This is where we're disagreeing fundamentally here because I have seen.
Redlining is a specific example.
Define redlining for me, please.
So redlining is vague for me because it's happened in the States and here, but redlining is after.
I have the definition right here.
Do you have a definition? Take it.
Okay. To refuse a loan or insurance or something similar to someone because they live in an area deemed to be a poor financial risk.
Right. So why was that area deemed to be a poor financial risk?
Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Do you want to explain it?
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, it's
It's because there was a systemic notion that black people were risky. Black people were poorer because they had recently been slaves. So white people were permitted to get richer, and white people were permitted to engage in real estate. Black people weren't. Is that a specific enough example?
I suppose, but it doesn't hold up practically in the modern sense because
Doesn't it?
No,
that is the modern sense. That's very recently.
I gotta finish the sentence here. There's
Go for it.
poverty is not as much of a racial thing anymore. I've known way too many people, rich, poor, that were just every color of the rainbow. It has,
but again, that is misunderstanding
and it has, yeah. And I mean, I didn't know the phrase redlining, but I do know a good number of people that we would call white that can't get things because of where they live.
That doesn't discount the fact that they still have privilege.
That is exactly where we're disagreeing here, is because if the privilege was a thing,
I'm talking about, this is a statement of fact, my friend.
If people
have privilege based on their skin color in our society, because white people have all the seats of power, white people have all of the wealth, white people have, as a generalization, like to look at a group. Yes, you can look at individuals and find for white people, and you can find rich black people, find whatever if you look at individuals. But like I said earlier, individuals are not entirely separate from the groups from which they live, and nor are groups entirely representative of the individuals within the groups. And so I'm saying, as a group, white privilege exists. Individuals, maybe not necessarily.
Josh, do you have anything to add or take away from this?
I don't know. It's just like you kind of blew through a lot, and I was about to chime in with a bunch of things, but then just we kind of moved to something else, and I feel like my Adderall's wearing off.
Oh, well, focus up. You don't need it.
I actually do need it. It's my doctor's prescribed it like 2 days ago.
All right.
Yeah, it's so yeah. So I remember. Okay, I was going to tell this one story, but and I'm not entirely sure where I was going to connect it to, but I guess I'll just throw it out there anyway. I'm a missionary kid.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in right when I turned 13, my family moved to Kenya, Africa, to be missionaries. My dad worked at an aircraft hangar, and my mother worked at orientation. And occasionally we would go out into the wilderness, see the Maasai, and help them build houses, that sort of thing. And it was interesting being in a minority.
I've been there. It's weird, right?
Yeah, it's interesting being a minority, and interesting the ways that you essentially get judged. It's like
you see your own skin color, don't you?
Huh?
Do you see your own skin color?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Yeah. There you go. You finish your story, and then I'll tell you mine.
Okay, so not a week after we got there, we were browsing around the Maasai market, and there was this guy who was trying to sell me a slingshot, and I just turned 13. Okay, I was just turned 13. I was a missionary kid. I didn't have any money. And so I kind of waved my hand and say, I'm sorry, sir, I don't have any money. And he just gives me this look. Like this look of stupefaction and utter incomprehension. He looks me up and down and says, "You've got to have money. You're white."
Right, because he sees your white privilege.
And there are just other times.
Prove my point.
Yeah, there are also other times where, it's like my dad. It's like a biker actually crashed into his car while he was parked, and then the cops showed up and that took statements, and my dad had to pay because in that area, the white man's word means nothing.
Right.
And I will still never
Because
forget.
they assume you have all the money.
Yeah, and there was also this one part where
I've been there. I've been to Uganda.
I'll never forget this part. We were just driving down the road and we got stopped by the police, and the police officer said we were speeding. And
You bribed them.
No, my dad clearly wasn't, and my dad said, "No, I'm not. I'm not speeding."
Yeah, you have to bribe them.
Yeah.
That's what they want.
Yeah, and it says, "Well, it was like, well, you can pay me money." It's like, "No, I'm not paying you money." My dad ended up in prison.
Yeah, because you didn't bribe them.
Yeah, and
when I was in Uganda, we were driving around, and they would like.
I'm sorry, I get choked up every time I talk about this.
It's tough, right?
Yeah, because I was like freaking 14, and I still haven't quite gotten over that. It's kind of scary seeing your own dad behind bars for refusing to participate in the corruption.
Yeah, but they see the privilege, and if you, I mean, like in that part of the world, I mean, I would be in a car full of black people and I'd be the only white guy, and they'd put me in the back seat behind the tinted windows because they didn't want the cops to see me, because if the cops saw me, then they would demand a bribe, which is what they did. Of course, they did see me and they did demand bribes.
Well, I wouldn't to be honest, I wouldn't actually call that privilege. I would call that I would call that a malefactor. Well,
it's both.
Okay, I think I figured it out. We are conflating the word privilege, which I think by Webster definition is and something advantageous to stereotypes. What do we think about that idea?
Is right.
Okay, so all right. So
I agree. Josh and I agree.
So all right, I think now that could very possibly have much wider implications outside of this conversation. If we're thinking about things in terms of stereotypes, and we recognize them as stereotypes and try to break them down rather than using a word like privilege, which puts somebody over somebody else, then we start from then in terms of the conversation and everybody's mentality, regardless of where you came from. Now we're all starting from a place of understanding, and we can start to break down the barriers of those stereotypes and see everything as more of an individual. Because what Peter New was saying earlier was that I was looking at things, I couldn't see privilege because of individual factors, but or individual examples that conflate or contradict what we would know as the privilege. But what I had said earlier in the stream tonight was that I choose not to ever look at a group, that I only see an individual in any given context. So I think we're starting to figure out where the disconnect is.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think, Peter?
I'm not entirely sure I followed that, because I find it hard to imagine that you can't see privilege, right? For me, it's an obvious, naked truth. So I find it difficult to see that you can't see it.
I think if I looked like my father, there would be something I don't know, and this is why I don't really like to play the what if game or even, and I'll explain something even deeper in a second here. But I think if I looked more like my father,
your father? What
he's darker.
Shade is he's darker?
Yeah, okay. He's darker. I've got like 3 or 4 different what you would define as races comprising me, and then I came out the palest one in the whole family. So I would, given where I grew up and the people I hung out with, I might not have had the same experiences, because there have been plenty of times I've been singled out for my skin color.
And what's that like? You've been singled out for your skin color as a white guy.
It never made sense to me. because I spent the first, and this is what I'm getting up to eventually is but then again, maybe it would have been different in other ways, and I would still have the same amount of scars, but maybe in different places.
So I bet, I'm really keen to know, like, why didn't it make sense?
Because I spent the first 15 years of my life trying to figure out, okay, am I black? Am I Japanese? Am I Italian? Am I, because I've got this big hodgepodge, and then when I was 15 and 16, I really started getting into my more spiritual side, and I wanted to learn everything there was to know about people. And the more I learned about people and cultures around the world, the more I realized that the differences were aesthetic and skin deep. And that and when I realized that, race stopped being a thing for me. So I don't believe, I've been picked on for my skin color. And but it never made sense because I am not anything except a human.
So that's another example of white privilege. Is I have never been picked on for my skin color. I've never had to consider it. I've never wasted any amount of time whatsoever worrying about what I am.
Well, I've been picked on for my skin color.
Have you?
Yeah,
because you lived in Kenya.
Yeah, well, not just because I lived in Kenya, but even here on the internet, I can't. Tell
I lived in the sticks, and my eyes look very Japanese.
Yeah. Let me finish, please.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as I said before, I frequent Tumblr, and there's a strong hive of scum and villainy there, and I can't tell you how many times I get whenever I post anything like vaguely political, and I get like vitriol in my inbox saying "shut up, Whitey," or "shut up, Cracker."
Right, but does that make you question your identity? Because Brony was just saying, I didn't know who I was for 15 years. I didn't know if I was Japanese, if I was black, was I white, was I Italian, was I what?
Well, I don't think
you never went through that. You just went, you call me a cracker. That's annoying.
Well,
That's a different thing.
Well, I don't think it matters either way, because it's still like discounting someone based off of superfluous factors that they can't change. It's like
Brony,
I don't call that white privilege. It's like
Brony,
if I'm being denied my thoughts, if I'm being denied speech based purely on my skin color, I don't call that white privilege.
You had a question for me, Peter?
Yeah. How does that sit with you? You said 15 years before you came to the conclusion that it shouldn't matter. You spent 15 years agonizing.
No, so I wouldn't say agonizing. I was 15. I guess I worded that wrong for the purpose of being dramatic in the moment, but
fair enough.
I was the only we'll say white friend in my immediate circle for most of my young life, but of course outside of that circle, then I was the white guy, and sometimes I got picked on for that. And even in my professional life, I was a photographer from 2000. I worked in nightclubs from 2011 until 2015, and I was usually the only white guy in there. Funny story, little side tangent here. I was charging this one girl. This one girl came up and ordered like $150 worth of prints, and then wanted it for like $75. And she went on this tangent about how I'm only charging her the full price because she's black or something like that. And the first words, and when she was done ranting, the first thing I said was, first of all, my father's darker than you. But whenever it came up, it was just a curious thing to me. And I wondered because, there were like slight cultural differences between the sides of my family, but then I realized it was aesthetic and it really didn't mean anything. We all still like spaghetti, and we all.
I like spaghetti. I'm not Italian at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Who doesn't like spaghetti?
Exactly. The family gatherings were all the same. Okay, and I told you about my uncle. Right.
Okay.
And
Okay. Can I interrupt for a second? It's like I always say that the easiest way to bring culture together is with food.
Oh yeah.
You are very correct. But anyway, So yeah, because of that, the idea of and then everything I've gone through before, I'll just give you a crash course here, Peter. I've been homeless. I've been shot at. I've got cuts on my body. And they've all been for and every hardship I've ever gone through has been a lot more related to my personal choices and who I'm hanging out with and the situations that I'm putting myself in than it has been my skin color. So the idea of privilege never made any sense to me.
But again, you're connecting with it as an individual. So
which is what and that's my ultimate point there, Peter, is that I believe it should always be about the individual. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right, and I disagree with that. I think that it has to sometimes be about the individual. Groups don't change without individual change. Individuals can't change without a group from which to change from. You have to have a balance. It has to exist like that.
I fully agree. I think
so there has to be that kind of concept.
Yeah.
In other words, to sort of land it, right? Like, you may not have experienced individual privilege, and you may not have experienced individual racism. The analog is for racism and privilege individually is systemic racism and privilege, right? So it's the same thing as, like, it's the difference between weather and climate, right? Like, okay, well, it's snowing outside. Obviously, global warming's not real. Well, no, global warming is real. Global warming is a thing. Just because it's snowing doesn't mean it's not happening. Global warming is privilege. Snowing is racism, right? Snowing is whether or not you're your own experience.
I certainly understand where you're coming from. I think we have fundamental differences and definitions of certain words and what causes them.
And I think life experiences is also kind of like I think our respective life experiences might be skewing our perspectives a little bit.
Well, obviously, but I also think the three of us are not altogether far apart on this. Largely, what happens, I think, is that people have a semantic reaction to something and say, "Oh, well, I don't like that. You said you didn't like the word privilege, and you said you didn't like the word eradicate." But I mean, do you honestly think that I'm talking about, "Oh, well, you've had this charmed life"? Of course not. Do you honestly think I'm talking about we need to murder the Nazi? Of course not.
No, I don't think you were referring to murder, but
but you take my point.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I understand, and
I'm not suggesting anything extreme.
Right?
Why would I? That's pointless.
So let me.
Yeah, I think I might have been spending too much time on Tumblr because I. Let me put it this way: I've met people who take what you say like a little more lukewarm, like usage of the word eradicated or like something little, and they mean it, like literally. It's
right.
Like, sure.
And so something I'd like to.
And I've had arguments with people who said some of the things that said to me tonight. I've had arguments with them, and they theyly mean no, is a complete myth, and white people are the best, all in the same breath. And it's
those people drive me nuts.
It's like,
why are you on my team?
Exactly. I feel the same way about some of the most liberals that
thank you.
How do you like? I take those. Whenever there's an election, I take one of tests you can do. I'm sure you have them in the States too, where you can go online and you answer a bunch of questions and it puts you on a graph, right?
I tend not
silly.
Yeah.
I got a funny story I got to tell you guys. When I was in 10th grade, I'm sure. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a short one, but it always puts me on the most left. That's where I live politically, right? Yeah. Every single time I've ever taken one of those, I'm like the most left possible wing you can get. But at the same time, I look around at all these other people that are on my team, as to use that, which I don't like calling it a team, but
yeah,
fair enough.
But there's all these people that I look at, and I'm just like, you're insane. Why are you being so unreasonable? And again, for me, it always comes down to decency, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think we are allowed to disagree. Of course we are. We are allowed to have opinions that are irreconcilable. Of course we are. But there's no reason to be indecent about it. My whole point in all of this, to circle it all the way back to what we're supposed to be talking about in the beginning, is that Nazism is indecent.
Oh yeah,
full stop. And it has no place
agreed.
in the world, let alone in the fandom. And it is in the fandom.
Perfect. That is a perfect segue to what I wanted to get to next. I should tell you guys this because I think it's kind of funny. When I was in 10th grade, I was taking a political science course in high school, and they gave us one of those tests. And you know what? I want to see if either of you can guess which past president I got. Peter, who do you think I got?
Gosh, well, I don't really know my presidents, obviously, but how far back are we talking about?
I'll give you a hint. 30 years. 30 years.
Did you get Jimmy Carter?
Close. Josh, who do you think I got?
Nixon.
I came home with Bill Clinton, and I think the only way I could have disappointed my father more is if I told him I was a brony.
Honestly, I got to tell you, it doesn't surprise me you got Bill Clinton, frankly. Sorry to break it to you.
I tend to lean right of center in my beliefs. But go ahead. Here's the thing that I can observe from being outside of America is you guys tend to look at the Democrats and the Republicans as left and right, respectively. I tend to look at them as centrist and right. Lately, the Democrats have started to move to the genuine left, but all my life, basically, they've been centrist and right, and there's been no genuine left wing. Interesting.
I'm really sorry. Yeah.
So Bill Clinton was a very much centrist, center-right president.
Yeah.
What do you think, Josh?
I don't know. It always kind of blows my mind that that other people are just so aware of what goes on in America politically, and I always feel kind of bad. It's like, but I don't know what's going on in Canada. I don't know what's I mean, I kind of know what's going on in the UK, but I don't know the politics of France. Wow, I feel kind of selfish.
Well, I'll tell you this to wrap it up. My father lives and breathes Reagan. So, and I say that with no malice or nothing. It's just a fact. There are some of Reagan's policies that I enjoyed quite a bit. I don't know how well it's held up over time. He'd be a better person to talk to about it than I am. He lived through it. So
I lived through it too.
Yeah. So, let's wrap this up here. I got a quick question and then a slightly longer question here. So there was a response article to the one of the from the Atlantic. I'm always blanking on the name and I don't know why. The Quillette by Daniel Friedman, and this article is also linked in the description and I sent it to you guys. Is the My Little Pony fan community really full of Nazis? And in this article it basically says no, that this article was cherry picking a very small in some might say negligible percentile, and saying that the not safe for work, the sexually and violently explicit artwork that the fandom has produced is a much more predominant and bigger problem that we should be worrying about. Peter, real quick, what do you think about that?
That's the bad apples argument.
All right.
I would say,
Josh?
I would say in terms of Nazis in the fandom, I think we have bigger fish to fry. In my opinion.
All right. So that's just my opinion. Yeah. I think we have bigger fish to fry. And that's a perfect transition into the second question here. So I'm not going to deny that racism or hatred of any kind is a problem. I would like it if we all loved each other. How do we solve this problem? Peter, what do you think? How do we get somebody to? Is it possible to get somebody to stop being racist? How do we do it? And or do we just kick them out of the fandom? What do you think?
Well, again, I don't believe in extremes in this stuff. I do think that, okay, look, if someone is sporting their Nazi flags and they're spouting racism and all that stuff, yeah, I'm afraid you can't come to the convention. I'm sorry, you can't. But that doesn't mean let's not be that person's friend. That doesn't mean let's not talk to that person. It doesn't mean let's not be compassionate. It does mean you can't come here and spread your hatred in the community. You can't be amplified. You can't have a voice. But you can be a friend, right? You can try and appeal to that person and try to bring them in through love.
Okay.
Oh. Have you ever read the book? What you said reminded me that little statement of philosophy. It's like, have you ever read the book Love, No Strings Attached by Rich Bueller?
No, I have not.
Okay, so basically what he talks about in this book, it's a premarital book that my dad threw at me. It's just like whenever I ask him a question like philosophical or something, he always throws a book at me. Figuratively, not literally. No, figuratively, not literally. But the thing he talks about in this book is the difference between love and approval, and how careful we need to be in showing someone love in a situation that constitutes love, and disapproval in a situation that constitutes disapproval. Example, you disapprove of your friend's excessive drinking. You think it's bad. You think eventually he's in danger of hurting someone. But that doesn't mean you're not going to disinvite him to your wedding because he's your friend. And if you disinvite him to your wedding, that's probably going to make him fall back into that habit even more.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing about like the absolutism of completely shutting a person down and forgetting about them entirely. That's just going to push them further. Like that's just being a Nazi towards a Nazi, basically, right? Like it's using fascism to confront.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said. You're thinking the same thing too, aren't you, Josh? That's so. Exactly. We almost never see somebody who leans left say something like that.
Yeah. That said, it's still subject to the paradox of tolerance, right? You cannot tolerate intolerance because intolerance will ruin tolerance. It will. And so you can't allow it, which is where I go to eradicate, right? You have to eradicate the poison. You have to suck it out because it will wreck it. Will wreck everything.
All right. Well, I can actually agree with that, but then that begs the question. I'm not sure if I'm using that phrase correctly, but that begs the question: how?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a bigger question, isn't it? And as I said, sort of all the way along today, it's complicated. And I think you have to start with, I don't think there's going to be, you can't just come up with a policy and say, okay, well, I'll sign this executive order.
Those are unconstitutional, by the way, and those drive me nuts.
It's not that easy, right? But I do think, like, look, if you're out there listening and you know someone who has their swastikas all over their Twitter profile or what have you, or is drawing, Nazi or white supremacist pony art and whatever else, talk to them.
Daryl Davis it up.
That's how it starts. Talk to them.
Dang it, you guys are stealing my thunder. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah,
I'm not pro-censorship. Give me a break, Zeus Assassin.
Don't look at that.
Erase yourself.
Yeah, that is. Oh, it has been a little bit of
myself for saying erase yourself as someone's saying you're censorship.
Oh yeah, it's a. Yeah, it's. I try not. It's. Yeah, I try not to pay. Yeah. Anyways,
that's DJ's job.
Yeah, it's really insane how much we.
I'm not pro censorship in any way, right? I'm just anti-hate.
Yeah.
All right, so
it's insane how much we. It's really insane how much we agree on these things, and I think and if you don't mind me saying, I think part of the problem is, it's like we get, and yeah, I get caught up in this too. I'm not perfect. I'm not gonna try and like look down my nose at other people who do this. It's like it's like a lot of times we do get caught up in fighting for a team.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
Identitarian politics.
Ask me if I've ever reacted.
Yeah, it's like we've all reacted badly in some way. It's like we've all done something stupid.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think Daryl Davis is the
will again.
I think Daryl Davis is the perfect example of these types of things. Now, me personally, I don't believe it would be a good idea to not give them a voice. I think it's more important to let them have the podium for a second and then approach them Socratically. Kind of like what we're doing here, where if we don't understand why, we ask the question, and then one of two things happens through the Socratic method. Either they wear themselves out and they realize, their own hypocrisy or their own faults in their logic. When you ask, eventually, if you ask too many questions, you will come to one that they don't know the answer to, and that how they react to not knowing the answer to a question is very telling of a person's intelligence, in my opinion.
Not only their intelligence, but not only their intelligence, but their willingness to grow and improve as a person.
Exactly. So,
the thing I object to in that is, like, yes, but not in a forum that amplifies, right? The issue for me with regard to that is, look, if you and I are good friends in real life, and I see you promoting your swastikas and everything, I will sit you down and you and I can have that conversation. We can have that civil debate.
And that's perfect, Peter. That's exactly what I want.
But to do so online, to do so in a public forum, merely serves to amplify toxicity, and that is extraordinarily dangerous.
And here's why I believe it's equally dangerous to not do that, because when you put it out, what I just described earlier was what can happen to somebody internally, but externally, when it happens in front of an audience, then the whole world gets a chance to see why it doesn't work, if it is something that is bad, or what parts of it come from something legitimate and got twisted into something illegitimate, and we can see and learn from that example as a community, and work from there. So it has an internal and an external. We can learn from it, kind of thing, regardless of where it's happening, and it might have a more pronounced effect if it is person to person. I definitely agree with you there. I don't think that there's no value in pushing it away. And here's another reason why, is because if you say you can't bring this here to the public square, then people start looking into it more. It's kind of the
Streisand effect.
Yeah, Thank you so very much, Josh. Yeah, the Streisand effect. And people get more curious about it. Okay, why are you pushing it down? And now they are only listening to that guy and you create more of an echo chamber. Then that person himself, he doesn't like being pushed down, so he's going to push back equally hard. Now, the whole reason
which is why there's a balance there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you have to kind of navigate it, right? You can't just say go away, but you also can't say let's discuss it publicly, and because what if you lose that argument?
Yeah.
What if you lose that argument? What if you win the argument?
Well, I mean, you've been talking from that bias, but what if you lose?
It's tricky. It's tricky. It's like I can see both of your points, and I can draw back to examples where in my own life where both have happened. But my personal philosophy regarding this is it's best to let the unreasonable opposition speak and let the world know how unreasonable their ideas are.
I think with this particular issue, though, I think you can point to 1945 and say, look how unreasonable this is. I don't think you need to hear it all.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is definitely unreasonable. We have so many tools at our disposal.
There's nothing new in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nothing new in it.
Yeah, that's the great thing about it, is that we can look back at history. We have so many tools readily available to us. Thank you, Internet, for dismantling these unreasonable ideas. And so why people are, I can understand why people are scared of it and why people might not want to engage in it. It's like a lot of times, it's like, I'll be honest, it's like in a lot of debates, when I first started, I tended to make a fool of myself, and that's why I didn't engage in a lot of debates, because I didn't know how to, because I wasn't good at it. And so, yeah, I do feel that, you know, we are better equipped to ideologically deal with Nazism today than we have ever been.
I hope that's true.
Yeah, something I would like to bring up as a concept, just to leave us with something to think about, is the duality of all things. That nature finds a balance. Now, we all know about Unit 771, right, from World War II. If I'm getting that name right, Josh, help me.
You're gonna have to remind me. I don't know.
Those were the Japanese and German scientists that were tasked with testing chemical, biological warfare on humans, torture, just to see, you know, for the purpose of scientific experimentation. The list is abundant, and it could make you throw up.
731.
731. Thank you so much. I used to be good at history. Anyway, so. Now, nobody would disagree that's horrible, but when World War II was over, that research was the basis for a lot of what we know in the medical field today that has been used to save just as many or more lives. So now that doesn't need to make a point for or against anything. It's just something to think about.
Yeah, careful. Yeah, careful with what you say there. I know what you meant, but the way you phrased it, careful.
Yeah, I suppose so. Then somebody phrase it better for me.
Look, I think that there are many different avenues toward discovery, but had we not had the Nazis, we would have come across those things eventually. Science has a habit of developing itself regardless.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Okay. All right, I'll buy that. Now then, we've talked for a little over an hour and a half about these things on a podcast that's normally an hour, so I'm sure we've had a lot of interesting stuff going on in the chat. DJ, you're up. Let's get some questions.
I have marked down a good few amount of questions. So
all right, let's hammer them out. Pick the best ones for us, and we'll hammer them out in the next 15 minutes.
I got a bunker.
Oh dear.
All right, first one up from Paladin Pony T. Brony, have you guys run into this in other fandoms like games, anime, etc.?
I've never been in any other fandoms.
It's certainly in the furry fandom. I imagine it's basically in it. I think there's something that I didn't know where this conversation was going to go, but something that I've observed, because after I was denied these conventions a few years ago, I got actually quite sour on the entire Brony community for a year or so there, and in order to purge that sourness, because the thing is, the overwhelming majority of these are awesome, amazing, and it's wonderful. But I had to purge that sourness out of myself. So I wrote a feature film called Con of the Dead, which is a zombie film set at a Brony convention.
That sounds kind of redundant there, Peter.
Well, it's kind of the point. If anyone listening has a few million bucks, it's ready to go.
Why have I not heard of this?
It's, follow me on the Twitters. I talk about it. You follow it. It's at con_of_the_dead on the Twitters. So, part of what I realized in the writing of that is that because it seemed initially baffling to me, right? Like, to me, I look at My Little Pony, and one of the things I'm really proud about it is that it's a show about a lot of the ideals that I share, right? About cooperation, about harmony, and it seemed baffling to me that a group of people that were interested in division and interested in white supremacy would find a home with it. But what I realized is that there's a huge overlap between fanaticism and fandom, and a lot of it is about people finding a thing that they can all agree on and feel a part of. And so the overlap between feeling a part of white supremacy and feeling a part of My Little Pony, or feeling a part of whatever Nickelback fandom, is very much the same for a lot of people. It's not for me. Like, I don't relate to things in particular, but I do think there's a huge number of people who do, and I think the overlap is quite strong between any fandom and that kind of fanaticism.
So feeling a part of something greater than yourself. Am I correct in
correct
doing that? Yeah.
Yeah,
I can see where you're coming from with that.
All right, next question.
Something a little lighthearted. Where did it go?
We don't want that, do we?
I just had it. Where'd it go?
While he's looking for that, you know something? We've been agreeing with each other too much on this stream. I need to mix it up. Starlight Glimmer did nothing wrong. Go for it, DJ.
Not now. Brianna.
Oh, go ahead.
Please go ahead, Josh.
Oh, well, I was just saying that I have a script in the works about, it's like an hour-long rant about why Starlight is the most overhated character in the show.
Poor Starlight.
I want to see it.
She started as an authoritarian and then learned how to not be.
And people kept treating her, and yeah, just kind of, my basic gist of the video is that it's like redemption, making redeemed characters is hard because there's really not a lot of examples you can draw from. It's like Starlight Glimmer was a reformed zealot. It's like, how many other reformed zealots in children's media can you point to? This is the first time. It's one of the first. The only other two that I can think of right now are Ashi from Samurai Jack, or what was the other one? And even then, that's kind of hard. Or like Scar from Full Metal Alchemist. And the thing is like, and I really do appreciate how they showed that. Yeah, even though Starlight reformed, she still had a lot of those authoritarian instincts. She still had a lot of those, fix the problem, beat the problem with magic until it's fixed, that she carried over from her villain days.
Ponies, hear my voice and listen.
It's a gradual. I really do appreciate how they showed that recovery from zealotry is kind of a gradual process, and it's going to take you a long time to unlearn some nasty habits.
Yep. All right, not to cut you off. Next question.
All right, we had a request from Brianna Sacre, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, asking if Mr. New could please say Firebrand in Big Macintosh's voice.
Firebrand.
That's my OC name, thank you.
That sounded way too good. Okay, it's almost like he plays the character or something.
I've been known to.
Yeah, you should go for that role, Peter. You'd fit it quite well.
I might get it.
Yeah. All right, what else we got?
We have a comment here from Headfrecker. The problem is that people don't respect the old saying, live and let live anymore. Everyone is allowed to have their own opinion, and you can talk about that, but the moment you attack someone for it is wrong. And they had a follow-up. The biggest problem is that we as a society try to make everyone equal. While that sounds nice on paper, the fact remains that we aren't equal. No one is like the other, and that has nothing to do with the big picture.
Ooh, I disagree with a couple of things in there. First of all, I'm not sure, from a historical standpoint, I'm not sure about the word anymore. I don't think the word anymore ever applied. I think it has always been that humanity as a whole has had an issue with the whole live and let live principle. And I don't know, I believe that everybody starts out equal. Peter and I argued for like a half hour about that, but it remains. I do believe we are separated by our choices. What do you guys think?
Well, live and let live. I want to be It's just, that is. Let me put it. Okay, that's a phrase that needs an asterisk next to it.
Agreed. I do ultimately generally agree live and let live, but I also think that we're not really talking about people's opinions. We're talking about an illness. And as far as equality is concerned, there's a difference between everybody being literally equal, which is absurd, and that seems to be what the commenter is talking about, and everybody having equality of access, equality of opportunity, equality
yes.
of, right? And those things are worthy of seeking and worthy of social justice warrioring for.
Agreed. I agree with you there. It's like it is better to pursue equality of opportunity rather than equality of outcome.
Nice.
100%. I mean, equality of outcome is impossible.
Yeah.
But equality of opportunity is achievable. So why not?
Yes.
DJ, do we have any questions or comments directed at anybody specifically? And if so, pick one for each of us.
We have one for Brony up first from Paladin Pony T. Brony, do you guys think that common sense has been lost?
Did we ever have it in the first place?
You beat me by 1 second.
It was my question, Firebrand! Back off! Alright, what else we got?
For Josh from Colin Brown, does racism exist in the military?
I would honestly say... Okay, this is hard because from my personal experience, I would say no. Because I have never seen an instance of it, ever. But then again, it's like my only experiences were, Cherry Point, North Carolina. It's like I can't speak for the entire Marine Corps, and I can't speak for the Navy, the Army, the Coast Guard. I mean, they're not a real military branch, but...
Bro.
but oh, come on. That's okay.
So historically,
I know that's the joke. Go ahead.
Yeah, but really, I don't.
Historically,
I've never seen it.
Go ahead.
I have never seen it. We all bleed. There's a saying in the military. It's like we all bleed green.
So historically, there has been a lot of racism in the military, right? So, are you suggesting then that all of that has been perfectly eradicated?
I mean, from my experience, I would say so, because I've never seen it. But then again, just because I don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
There you go.
I would say that like, yeah, it's really interesting how it's. Racism has, in my entire 4-year career, has never been... Oh, actually, there is one story that I can tell you from this, and this actually happened during boot camp. And so, yeah, boot camp, it's basically just a giant 3-month wait just to screw with you. And it's intentionally designed to stress you out in order to simulate, combat stress. And during one of this, a colored individual blurted out the N-word, but the version of the N-word with an A at the end. And my drill instructor rounded on him, and I will never forget what he said. He just started yelling at him and saying, "Is that beeping acceptable language?" It was so amazing to hear that. And right afterwards, we had a battalion meeting about why racism was bad. Basically, it's like a giant TED talk about racism being bad. And he got page 11, which is the equivalent of getting something on your permanent record of, yeah, he said he used a racial slur at this date. And no matter where he transfers to, that's the first thing that the guy who checks him in is going to see, and it haunted him throughout his entire career.
So, knowing that kind of penalty exists, you think there are people in the military silence themselves?
Possibly,
because the military is a pretty authoritarian enterprise, right?
Yeah, that's kind of why I left.
So knowing that the punishment exists and is immediate, seems to me silences the racists.
Yeah, I suppose.
As opposed to eliminating them, as opposed to it not being there, it not being a problem, it just pushes it into the shadows, I think.
I think it bottles it up and suppresses it, which might end up exploding in other ways later. But I mean, you're certainly not wrong.
Yeah, probably. I mean, yeah, we have other problems in the military that are certainly worthy of attention. I mean, it's like if in the military, if racism was a fire, I would say it's a lit match. And there are other problems that I would consider bonfires that are a little bit more worthy of attention at the moment.
I'd love to hear from one of your non-white colleagues on that matter.
Probably, yeah. It's.
Josh, may I add something to what you're saying here?
Sure.
I out of curiosity, one day I watched a video that was it was a compilation of testimonials from people who used to be racist, and the question was, what made you change your mind? And about half of those stories were from Marines, and they were almost all. I grew up in in an area where there was only one type of person, and everybody I knew hated all the other types of people. And then I went into the Marines for various reasons outsides of my control, and I ended up needing to work so closely and having good relationships and positive experiences with such a variety of people that the things I believed growing up couldn't stand anymore. A
lot of it is friendship. A lot of it, that's true. It's like a lot of it is friendship forged in fire, and yeah, especially in boot camp. It's like you get people from all over the place, and the first thing you got to do work together is how to get through the sickness, because you get all these microbes that people from their own places have acclimated to, but you bring those to boot camp, and they all come together and they mutate, and yeah, it's like people get cellulitis, whooping cough. It's really bad, but that's beside the point.
Right.
It's like the point is that yeah, you do get people from all over the place, and you get people you get people together, and they have all these different experiences, and they have to learn. It's like, and these are people that you essentially have to trust your life to, and if you can't do that, you're not Marine material.
Yeah, so half of those stories were Marine. The other half was a mixture of pretty much the same exact story, but instead of going into the Marines, it was the Army, or it was college, or it was some other job where there was just a very diverse set of people.
Yeah, I remember seeing on Tumblr, weirdly enough, one of the most effective ways to combat racism is travel.
Yep. Okay, so let's move on to another question.
All right, this one came up, I believe, during Josh and Peter's stories about Africa. From Princess Heather Blossom: isn't assuming people's financial status based on race racist?
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, not anymore, because the definition of racism got changed recently. Did you hear about that?
Oh no, I didn't.
No, the definition of racism got changed to race-based prejudice from a position of power.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel. Peter, what do you think about that?
Peter will be right back.
Oh,
okay.
Lovely.
Oh, he can hear though. Sorry.
Yep. Okay, so
you will answer that in just a moment.
All right.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's quite all right. Hello, by the way.
I drank like 3 giant glasses of water like 2 hours ago, and I've been sitting here crossing my legs. So, is it racism to? Yeah, no, because racism is based on a position of power, and so the perceived power is that the white people have the power.
And that's the thing. It's like when people say, it's like it just. Really, it depends on which definition of racism that you're using, because some people say that racism is race-based prejudice plus power, and some people say it's just race-based prejudice. And I'm glad you constantly did this during this whole discussion, Brony. It's like, what do you mean by this word?
Yeah, that's important. I like to draw a line between racism and prejudice. Right, I use prejudice when I'm talking about. Yes, there's a prejudice involved with I was in Uganda getting bribed because I'm white, then that's prejudice against me. But I don't say it's racist.
Yeah, I noticed that most of the I noticed that most liberals subscribe to the definition of racism as race-based prejudice plus power, and most conservatives I speak to just subscribe to the definition of race-based prejudice.
Right, and most liberals also seem to understand the idea of privilege, and most conservatives seem to rail against it.
That's very. I don't think we can deny that after. I don't think we can deny that after tonight. I will confess to this, is that Peter called me out a little while ago on having a semantic response to certain things, and I will fully admit that's very true. I've been a writer for pretty much my whole life, and I always pick my words extremely carefully. Like words that we would even by Webster's definition of being synonymous, I will use. I have a very specific context for when I will use which synonym. So that one's totally on me.
Yeah, because it's in a lot of cases, it's really. I mean, I know I'm a kind of a hypocrite for saying this because I just did that to Peter earlier in the conversation, but yeah, it's like agonizing over word choice a lot of times is pointless because a lot of times people will just hear what they want to hear, and a lot of times people will just take out of context what they want to take out of context.
That's why I feel like...
And they'll knee-jerk, right? People will knee-jerk and react, right?
That's why I feel like asking the question of what do you mean by this word is so important, and I try to do it as much as possible.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
What do you mean by the word...
What do you mean by the word brony?
Yeah.
It's because some people would say that use that definition as male fan of My Little Pony or just fan of My Little Pony.
Yeah.
Different definitions.
All right, let's get another question.
We have a comment from Samut Lion. I found most of the Nazi fan bronies and furries like it for the uniform and dressing up.
The aesthetic. What do we think about the aesthetic?
Oh, man.
Let's hear it, Josh.
The fine line,
Was there
man.
recently a hit anime that had the Nazi aesthetic? I could have
It's a fine
sworn there
line.
was.
I don't like complimenting Nazis on anything.
Man, they did have a really good fashion sense. It
They
can't be
did, and
denied.
I hate it.
Yeah, I hate it too.
I don't. It's like, dang
hate
it!
that I
Why
like
do
it,
you
but,
look
you
so
know.
snazzy?
I was one of those rare people that learned the religious significance of the swastika before I learned the 20th century historical significance of the swastika. And I was so confused.
Yeah, it doesn't make it okay though, because the 20th century significance is taken.
Yeah, it changed. It changed. And as much as I don't like it, it is a fact. And maybe
It's
someday
just like
maybe someday it'll change back, but it won't be anytime soon.
it's kind of like that OK symbol of recently, right? People doing the O and the K together, meaning a white power.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because that's ridiculous.
For sure. But like, I still do the OK, but like, I think that more and more, it's like I'm afraid to use it because I don't want to be misconstrued.
I'm not going to give those people power.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. Is like it's like, I mean, I understand they're 4chan pranks, but it's like, come on, I'm tired of. Come on, 4chan, I'm tired of getting yelled at for things they do.
Josh, don't feed the trolls.
So, in terms of the aesthetic, I mean, ultimately, I think, I mean, you have to take everything in its own particular context, but by and large, I don't think it's altogether different from blackface. I mean, it's different in many ways because it's, Nazis are powerful and historically black people are not. So that's a difference. But I do think that there is a sort of minstrel aspect of it. And what you're doing is taking a symbol of evil and fascism and making a game of it. And I don't know if that's all right.
Yeah, it's not a good game. I'm not going to deny that people are that people are sociopaths. But yeah, because they're sociopaths, I try not to give them power through that. DJ, what else we got?
Well, hang on. I want to.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
If you don't mind me proselytizing a little bit,
do it.
1 Thessalonians 5:22, abstain from all appearance of evil.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly try. I wouldn't say I'm very good at it, but I try. And for making me come to terms with my shortcomings, I shall grant you a boot to the head. All
You're
right.
a Frantics fan.
Yep.
Because good Canadian sketch comedy there.
The Canadians have a lot of great humor. I'm especially fond of Letterkenny at the moment.
I think my favorite one is it's how it became crude without actually saying anything crude. It's the dirty word sketch. That one's
That's a brilliant one.
that one's my favorite.
Red skin squeeze out brown.
Areas.
Alrighty then. Hey,
Funny to be true.
I think we've gone way over time, so I'm not really worried about that. But how many more do we got, DJ?
I think this might be a good one to close out, relating back to our original topic.
Let's
from
do it.
Andre Balil. Sorry again if I'm mispronouncing. Almost every fandom has members who are bigoted, so why is it bronies are being targeted for the issue all of a sudden?
I don't think they are.
Well,
I think this is
yeah.
any fandom is going to have its bigots, absolutely, but every fandom is going to have to deal with those bigots individually. And honestly, I do think that there is a tendency, partly because I think bronies are mostly male, I think there is a tendency to resist examining oneself.
I think part of the problem is that I think part of what makes it seem like the bronies are getting targeted so much lately is because, well, I mean, look at the subject material we're fans of. It's pretty much it's a near antithesis of Nazism.
Exactly.
So basically that whole cognitive dissonance sparks discussion and kind of propels it into the stratosphere.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I don't really think it's like. The whole reason I wanted to have this conversation was because I thought that article by The Atlantic was mostly bunk. All the examples they were pulling were from anywhere between 5 to 7 years ago, and nobody took them seriously in the moment. So I just ultimately had no idea why it was suddenly such an issue. I think it was just purely for click. Yeah, I think it, but I think it was just purely for clickbait, and it worked, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we bit hard, hook, line, and sinker.
Yep,
and I'm actually glad that we bit hard, frankly, because it is a thing that I've been wanting bronies to be talking about since then, and they have not been, and I'm glad we're doing it now.
And we got us four and the 80 people currently watching who have something additional to take away, and hopefully they all learned something from it. And with that, I think that's a good spot to wrap it up. So let me ask you guys this: did you have fun with the conversation tonight?
Yeah, I had a lot more fun. I had a lot more fun than I was expecting. It's been a while since I've been in a public debate, and my last one didn't go very well.
All right. Well, hopefully I gave you some new skills to take away here. Peter, did you learn anything tonight?
I don't know if I learned anything specific. I did learn that perhaps I need to understand that the people I'm talking to are coming from a place of a different understanding than me, maybe a bit better. I think I often assume that everybody comes from the same base understanding of things, and I realize I have to explain things more.
Yeah. I don't think you're alone. I don't think you're alone in that instinct. I fall into that trap too.
It's a very human trap to fall into.
Yeah,
my confirmation bias is strong.
Oh yeah, I can remember like recently I got into an argument with my best friend about a video game, and we were both looking at the same screen image, the same frame, yet we both drew completely different conclusions from it.
So Josh, have you learned anything tonight?
Yes, I have learned a lot. It's just I've learned, like it's just how often people think of these things. I'll be honest. It's I don't I try to talk with people on the other end of the spectrum, but
Political spectrum, yeah.
yeah, on the other side of the political, or who identify as being on the other end of the political spectrum, and a lot of times I don't have a lot of great conversations. So I guess if I'm being fair, I did come here with a small prejudice, but I'm glad I'm glad it was eliminated.
I'm glad it was too, Josh.
Yeah.
That was my goal. I certainly the one big thing I learned is exactly how susceptible my semantics makes me to misunderstandings. I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff that I will not have immediately learned, but will slowly through osmosis absorb over the next couple of weeks. I certainly have a lot to think about, and I've been given a lot to add to my collective understanding of people as a whole. So thank you very much, Peter, for coming on and helping me with that. Josh, thank you so very much for coming on and helping me with that. Thanks to both of you for filling in the occasional gaps in knowledge that I had. I had a ton of fun, and this is exactly what I was hoping it to be. I hope everybody out there had an amazing time listening as well and learned something from it. So with that, I'm going to go into my big long outro here. If you would like to make a suggestion for a topic to be discussed on this, just hit me up on Twitter at Brony Debates or send me an email at bronydebates@gmail.com. If you would like to get on the show, I would love to have you. We just need to get you on the Patreon for as little as $1 a month, where you can join the discussion or be put in the rotation to pick a game for the Friday night fights that we do bi-weekly. I'm extremely grateful to all of my supporters on Patreon, especially those guys on the $10 and up tier, one of which is our moderator, DJ Skywalker. Thank you so much for coming on and handling the chat for us tonight, sir.
You're very welcome.
Yep.
Very interesting discussion.
Good. And the rest of them are Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Jennan, Kellogg, Kyle Christensen, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, Princess, Sunshine, Sparkle, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series. Be sure to check out all their links in the description and thank them for their support. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out and having this conversation with me. I hope you have a great night. Please stay safe.
Yep.
You're welcome.
I had to get